Icon Comic Con presents Behind the Comic Book Podcast.
Hey everybody, it's Mr. 845 here, and we're interviewing some more comic book creators, writers, and artists, all for our Icon Comic Con. I'm here with Michael Oden. Michael, tell me, who are you and what do you do?
Well, thank you for having me on. First and foremost, obviously, as you said, my name is Michael Oden. I am a indie comics writer and creator. I started my own publishing imprint 5 years ago called Nine Realms Publishing. And since then, I've done 9 titles between stuff that I've produced and things I've written for other people, and even done some editing work here or there. Probably my biggest title at this point is a dark superhero comic called The Embrace, which did very well. We did that in 2020, 2021. But yeah, so like that's who I am. That's my history, and that's why I'm here.
Awesome. So first and foremost, what I like to do with a lot of the people that come onto my podcast is, if nobody watches anything else of the video and they just stop right here, or not right here, but in a couple seconds, the best ways to either support you, contact you, or follow you.
Well, the best way to support me right now is we have a Kickstarter going on for the reboot of my first series, Elysian Fields, which is called Elysian Fields Reborn. That is live on Kickstarter right now. We are pretty much at our funding goal by the time that this goes live. I'm hoping that, we will have pushed past that. We're at 90% as time of recording right now. But yeah, so you can support us there, and then please feel free to follow us on Nine Realms Publishing on Facebook and 9RP Comics on Instagram. And then if you don't mind hearing me rant and complain about the set photos from Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey, you can follow me on Twitter at ElysianFields_0, because that's generally what I've been doing there lately.
All right. Trying to occupy yourself on Twitter, huh? So the important thing is I will have all the links. So if anything, first and foremost, I want to make sure that everybody knows that you can just go to the YouTube or the Facebook or the Instagram, and I'll have the links there for him, in case you guys want to follow. So kind of going into it, so explain kind of like what your comic book is all about. So like kind of give it some background in that sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So for Elysian Fields Reborn, which is my current campaign, as I said, it's a reboot of my initial series. And the baseline pitch is, if you take Mortal Kombat and make it with heroes of mythology, right? So our story starts off and we're at the 10th year of the Trojan War. We get to see Achilles' final battle at Troy, and he dies, goes down to the underworld, has like a little bit of peacetime, and then he gets pulled out of that to get brought into this tournament where he's fighting alongside Heracles and Hippolyta against heroes from completely different cultural mythologies. And so Achilles' skills are being put to a test that they never really had in life. Oh, and wow. The overall outcome of this will decide whether or not Hades, who's kind of their sponsor, will become the next Lord of the Underworld again and regain his title, or whoever else.
Okay. I can see this. This sounds exciting. It sounds like a battle royale. Let's go.
Oh, it's a blast, and it's been such a great thing to put together. The art team that I've worked on with this book is just beyond sensational. We've got William Moraes has done our pencils. Tiago Gomez is on our inks. This up-and-comer colorist called Ruvian and his flatter Lou Winter have done a tremendous job, like really amping up the atmosphere and action through their color work. And then we've just got some fantastic variant covers from pretty big industry names like V. Ken Marion and Andrew Dahlhaus, Von Randall, and Robert Nugent. There's a lot to offer on this campaign.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, man. So, the biggest thing that I like to make sure that people kind of get out of this is kind of like also getting like your background and kind of like, where you've been, right? So, I'm sure that when you first started writing comic books, it wasn't necessarily right now, but take me back to like when you were a kid. Is this something that you always wanted to do, or is this something kind of like it just fell in? Like, take me through the history of what brought you to the comic book world.
So I think that what brought me to the comic book world is kind of like a dual prong thing. Yeah, I was a kid, and so stories I became enamored with, especially because as a kid, my dad would read me the Iliad as my bedtime story. So like
Okay.
the love of myth and heroes and everything like that, that was ingrained there. But at the same time, I had two older half brothers who were in high school that would watch over me and my sister frequently, and they were huge comic nerds, right? They got me into Spider-Man the animated series, Batman the animated series, and then because I was a 5-year-old that was hovering over them, I watched a lot of stuff that I probably shouldn't have, like HBO's animated Spawn,
Oh
or
yeah, that was intense.
or like Aliens and stuff like that. So like I've always had this kind of love of comics, and I would pilfer their comic book collection as a kid, read through those. Uh, so yeah, like I've just always loved comics, and then uh, I was deployed in 2016 to Qatar, which is no real deployment. It's You're on a paid vacation in one of the most uncomfortable places in the world.
Okay.
And so to kill time, I actually started writing for a industry outlet called Movie Pilot, which I think still exists, but they're owned by. Point is, that's where I got started in writing.
Okay.
Was uh, I did a review of Superman Rebirth issue 2, which got noticed by Movie Pilot. They did some tweaks and bolstered it across all of their social media, and it blew up. And they brought me into their verified creator program. So
Nice.
I did that and became an official writer for Movie Pilot for a bit. Started my own blog for a little, and then I wrote for Heroic Hollywood for about 3 weeks, which was one of the most miserable experiences of my life. I dipped out pretty quick, and then you know uh, wrote for an outlet called Up Your Geek for a while. Um, and in all that time, I would very frequently get the question, "Oh, because I was writing all these like commentary, like op-ed pieces, giving commentary on superhero films, comics, etc." And so like every couple of articles, it'd get in the comments like, "Why aren't you doing your own thing? Like, why aren't you making your own books? Or why aren't you pitching to Marvel, DC?" And you know, knowing how the industry worked by that point, I was just like, you can't really like. There's no real good gate of entry for somebody in the like you kind of have to know people to get in.
Hmm.
um and like especially when it comes down to like Marvel, DC, like those companies don't take unsolicited pitches. And then like Image, Dark Horse, all of them, like you can submit stuff to them, but you have to have completed art, you have to have all this stuff like ready to go. And so by that point you're kind of just doing your own thing anyway. And uh around 2019, I started to actually develop my own script for the first draft of what would become Elysian Fields issue 0, which was my first campaign that I did. And in 2020, I got Nine Realms Publishing off the ground, and started to crowdfund, which at that point in time was able like it had just kind of started to boom. Pandemic had started, and everyone had stimulus money. Mainstream industry had gone pencils down. So it was very like lightning in a bottle moment. And so like I had a lot of initial success, and then my
Hmm.
follow up book I did not have a lot of success on, and so I actually almost quit. And then I came up with the idea for the Embrace, which really spoke to people, and we had a campaign where we raised almost $20,000 and reached
Nice.
15 countries outside of the U.S. It was a uh, very impressive feat for somebody with no industry cred to speak of, and uh, I've been going at it ever since.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, it takes a lot of perseverance, right? In
Yes.
the sense that you have those bigger companies that can really like put a damper because everybody knows that it's like more mainstream in that sense, right? But being
Yeah.
able to maintain and continue on the story, especially because I'm sure that some of your books might have left like a cliffhanger, and you want to make sure that people can conclude on kind of some of the stuff that you're trying to tell story wise. So I know we kind of dabbled into the like what your influences were, but if you had to pick like who was your first and foremost outstanding comic book character that was coming through the ranks in the 90s and in the early 2000s, kind of like what kind of brought you into the comic book world that you said, you know what, this is the character that I would like to um follow for years to come, and then eventually, somewhat emulate.
That's a tough question, man.
I didn't say it was going to be the easy interview.
It's so like, all right. As a kid, I think my favorite character was obviously Spider-Man. And then, you know, I came to really love Captain America, and he's been my favorite superhero since I was like 10 years old.
Awesome.
Um,
Right on.
so I love Cap. The Brubaker run was going on when I was in high school, and it was the first run that I actually had like a subscription to. I had books come into my mailbox and everything like that back when Marvel used to do that. Um, but I think if it's a character that made me want to write comics, it's Walter B. Gibson's The Shadow.
Okay.
And in fact, the big reason why I got in like where I like the big moment that inspired me to actually write my own stuff was um, I had come up with a treatment for a Shadow animated series, and I was trying to shop it. Um, and so I knew that Dynamite had held the publishing rights, and so I reached out to their director of future projects because it was on their website, and I got in touch with him, and he was like, "Oh, well, we've never had like the screen rights of the Shadow, but like hit me with your pitch." And so I broke down like what I was hoping to do with this series, and gave him actually we were on the phone for like an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of this, he goes, "So, we've never held film rights for this, and it's a shame because we just lost the print rights.
Wow.
But if we still had those, we would be partnering you with one of our veteran writers, and we'd be developing this because this sounds great."
Yeah. Didn't they
Um,
didn't they mimic this in a movie? What did a Baldwin? No,
yeah,
I'm
Alec
thinking.
Baldwin was
Yeah,
was played the Shadow in the 1990s. It's one of my favorite movies. I own the special collector's edition that was released on I think the
yeah, yeah,
20th
yeah.
anniversary last year. Um, I love that film to death. The score is beautiful, and Baldwin does a tremendous job as the Shadow. And like, I love that movie. Like,
Yeah.
it's an underrated classic. The opening sequence at the bridge is one of the best intros to a superhero character on screen to this day, and I will fight people over it. But
I can take them.
I'll do it. But like, uh, so like the Shadow has always been this character that I've really liked. He's one of my dad's favorite characters, and when I was growing up, I actually for Christmas one year I was given like the entire audio cassette collection uh of his radio show.
So kids,
Um,
audio cassettes are in
Dating
case
myself
in case they
very
don't
hard.
know. It's a little tape. It's a CD, but it's in like a little tape. It looks like a little
Even
square. You could
CD's a
stick it into
dated
the
reference at this
yeah.
point, man. Like it's so freaking crazy. Uh, but like, point is, like I've always loved that character. I love that style of storytelling. And I have some really cool ideas of how I would handle the Shadow.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, funny. I also, one, I wanted to not glaze over, but thank you for your service. Because you said you got deployed, right? So
Yeah.
I'm assuming that it was the military.
Yeah.
But so
Yes.
thank you for your
That
service
was
there. Because that sacrifice alone is something that is very important to me and my family. So I just wanted to get that out of the way and make sure that people understood that. So veteran owned. Um, Comic books are something that I definitely want to support because it's important, right? So I mean, not only did you do the sacrifice, but the stories that you could possibly meld into the works that you do could really speak to um, your mental state at the time, right? Or it
yeah.
actually helped you through those times, so it all depends. But going into writing, when did you start like officially like start your I know you probably went through it already, but I just want to kind of make sure that we grounded it. When you first started thinking that like, okay, this is gonna definitely become a comic book. Like I know you were writing the script, but like you were, hey, this is going to be a comic book instead of like a movie script or a TV show or
So
something like that.
so like and with Elysian Fields in particular, this is always something that I had envisioned as a comic. Like the my like initial rounds of ideas for it, I actually started coming up with in high school. Um, Back when I was still, I'm gonna write, draw, and do everything.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a writer. My art is okay, but like by no means at all should I ever be hired to do sequential work. I don't have the patience for it.
Okay.
Like I would never. Um, and but like it, so like it had always just kind of existed in my head as that, but I really started to push into making it a comic script, which was very difficult because the amount of times I would look up, you know, classes on like writing a comic script or everything like that, it would always be like movie scripts or this, that, the other, and it's very hard to find something that will teach you how to write a comic script. There are plenty of books on how to draw comics,
Yeah.
not a lot on how to write them. And I don't mean from a standpoint of, how do you pace your narrative? How do you write character dialogue? Like more along the lines of, because writing a comic script is such a blend between creative and technical writing.
Mm-hmm.
Because effectively what you're doing is you have to create an engaging enough narrative to to inspire you to keep writing, obviously, but to excite your artist and make sure that they're doing what they need to do. Sorry, my computer became unplugged. There we go. All right, we're back. But um, the second the like, but like the second thing that you need to be able to do is you need to be able to convey properly how you want your sequential story to be told,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which means informing your artist, like where you want your camera angles, what type of page structure do you want, how many panels do you want on this page, and more to that point, how many panels should you put on a page? Like what's like a good standard amount to have for each page? How many spreads should you have in your book? And stuff like that. And so effectively, I had to teach myself all of that. And the way that I did was around that time, Marv Wolfman and DC Comics had released a special edition of his Man and Superman book, which I adored. And in the back of it, there was a copy of his script for the first issue.
Mm-hmm.
And so I literally used that as a Bible. And I was like, oh, okay, if I want to replicate this kind of layout that he has here, let's look at how he describes it. And so that's how I kind of taught myself how to write comics. And that process was between like 2019, 2020.
Okay. So, let's talk about the comic, right?
Mhm.
So as you're describing all these different angles and perspectives, right? So the first person, third person, there's a narrator, you're
Yeah.
talking through the characters. What are we doing? So that way
I
we
mean,
kind of get
so
an idea.
for Elysian Fields in particular,
Mm-hmm.
um, it's certainly not first or second person. It's third person. We have a narrator that serves in the backdrop, but that narrator is also a character in the story. That you find like it, I hope that you know who it is by the time the first book ends. Like I'm
Yeah, don't give
not
it away.
particularly
Don't give it
subtle
away.
about it,
Leave them in
but
suspense.
the point is that he is a character in the story, um, and you're kind of getting to see things through his lens.
Okay.
And I mean, obviously, our protagonist is Achilles, and his chief support characters are Heracles and Hippolyta. There will be others that get introduced throughout, uh, and it's an exciting book.
So what made you want to like? I mean, Mortal Kombat style, right?
Mhm.
What made you want to go back to the? I know that you kind of went through like your dad's, reading you these stories. But like, what made you fall in love with Greek mythology in that sense?
Well,
And want to
so
use it as your base?
so it started with the Iliad. Obviously, like my dad read me that, but like that sparked the love of history and mythology. Um, And then in terms of this particular book, it's I was an unabashed nerd by middle school, where like I wasn't just reading
We were all
comics. Like
there. We were all there.
I was taking classical Latin, and I was literally participating in Latin curtamens, which if you don't know what these are, they are academic competitions held by like the National Classic Society of America,
Mhm.
where it's literally a nerd off. It's like challenging you on
You
like
coined that
actual
word, nerd off.
La- yeah, like a Latin, like hey, translate this into Latin, or hey, here's a bunch of things about Roman history and mythology, and so I was incredibly nerdy. And when you're hanging around other people like that, you're not just asking each other which of your favorite superheroes are going to win in a fight. You're asking, like, oh man, who do you think would win in a wrestling match between like Heracles and Beowulf? Or who do you think would win in a fight between Gilgamesh and Achilles? And so like that was kind of like the whole thing with that is, Elysian Fields became this way to kind of explore that concept.
Yeah.
As I was growing up, we had things like Deadliest Warrior, we had Death Battle, where all of these things were kind of explored and what have you. And very frequently, I would disagree with certain results, especially if they brought in like classical characters.
Hmm.
Um, so it was just one of these things where that really is what drove my love of this. And you know, history is the greatest story ever told. There's so much rich tapestry there, but along with history are these tales and stories that have defined each culture and what they held as values. And you know, I've always been incredibly fascinated by that. Like with the Iliad in particular, I could give like a 3 hour talk about what the Iliad is, what it's a parable of, and what it represents in Greek identity and culture. And like Achilles is probably one of my favorite characters in history slash fiction, right? Because the veracity of whether or not Achilles was a real person, you could toss that up in the air, and like the archaeology certainly doesn't necessarily support the exact narrative of how the Trojan War went about. But then again, we also thought that Troy was a complete myth, and everything prior to the 20th century when Henry Schliemann used the Iliad to find Troy, and then everyone's mind went boom. It's like, wait, this is real.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where you know like Achilles is this person that is I've always been fascinated by, and like the more that I've read about him, between the Iliad, post Homerica, the Odyssey, and even the Greek tragedies and dramas that he participates in, or even Shakespeare's Troilus and Cressida. Um, there's so much rich text and subtext on Achilles that he is just such a fascinating character, and I am very excited to play with him as a toy in the playground and do so in a way that I feel is very authentic to who he is.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, trying to create a comic book out of nowhere, is something that is very difficult. And then to
Mm.
be able to kind of lean into some base, right? Like you have a history as a base that you could use, and kind of like history mythology to use as a base. So it kind of helps bring a narrative because people can relate. They've heard of these characters in some form or fashion, and they are able to kind of relate to them a lot better. So it kind of does give that better story, right? I mean, in the sense that you can really relate to things that you've already learned in high school. You could be like, wait a second, let's see if that would actually work. I definitely see where this could definitely succeed in the sense that you're delving into things that people like. What if this happened? You're doing the what ifs in that. So Mortal Kombat. Everybody in the '90s was like loving that video game, and eventually, as it became the movie, people were like Mortal Kombat. So I'm sure that there's like Spartans and stuff like that in there as well. Or
So
give us
so
like kind of some of the groundwork.
so as I said, like, Achilles goes down there and he is immediately pushed into when he gets to the arena, you have Heracles and Hippolyta are like mid battle. And Hippolyta is a queen of the Amazons, and Heracles is, well, Heracles. So, and they are fighting Gilgamesh and Enkidu down there. And so Achilles comes in and kind of interrupts the fight and hijacks this fight that's been going on between specifically Hippolyta and Gilgamesh um, to face Gilgamesh. And so like that's kind of where our story starts off in terms of the tournament. But like in terms of like the grander scope, like you're not going to see like Leonidas or anything like that in the arena. Like that's not the purpose. And like if I were to do like a cameo like that, they would have to be just somebody watching from the crowd.
Okay.
Because this event does take place in the underworld. The stadium is filled with undead souls that are watching. But I think that the big thing with it is it's less about just focusing on the Greeks and more of you know tapping into this rich narrative of cultural DNA that has shaped so much of what we look at today from all corners of the globe. Um, you know, in the third issue, because I've written all the way up to issue 3. I'm working on issue 4. So in the third issue, you get to see, you know, the Achilles and Hippolyta are watching a fight between Japanese heroes and Norse heroes.
Okay.
And so like you're getting to see like one of the big things you get to see is a sword fight between Miyamoto Musashi and Sigurd. And it was a blast to put together, and
Mm-hmm.
in it was another one of those things where I got to play around with the what ifs, right? Like certain things with that fight go about how you'd expect it, other
Yeah.
things take some interesting turns.
Yeah, so
um
this is like Soul Calibur meets
yeah
Greek mythology and kind of like the entities and kind of like in different cultures,
yeah
but it's like a Soul Calibur. I mean, this would be an awesome video game. I'm just saying,
oh
like, so.
I know. And like at some point, like especially with how beautifully these characters are drawn, like I at some point I would love to do like a 2D side scroller, like with the hand drawn animation style
Mm,
for this, because like these characters are sick and they would make great, like this would make a great like Musou style fighting game.
yeah.
um but like yeah, like for right now, obviously focusing on the comic
Oh
aspect,
yeah,
it's
yeah. But I mean,
very
there's a lot that you could do with it based on your story. I mean, you literally could do so much with this because of the fact that you're bringing so many different characters together. So now, I want to be able to kind of also talk about like the promotional side, right? So
Yeah.
when you are trying to promote this book, other than Kickstarter, what other methods have you used to kind of really help promote the books?
Well, I mean, obviously, you have to go and talk to people, right? Uh, Over the past 5 years, with where like I started, it was the pandemic. So like most of my customer facing has been through YouTube promotionals,
Okay.
going on people's streams, being live, interacting with hosts and people in the chat. Uh, Social media facing, obviously, so Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Uh, Prior to this campaign, I had mainly done my funding on Indiegogo. But the past couple books that I did with Indiegogo, I got shadow banned, so I'm no longer hosting on that platform.
Okay.
Because, and to explain what shadow banning is for anyone that is curious, it is my campaign existed on their platform, like, and if you had my URL and everything like that, you would be able to go and pledge your support and everything like that. But if you searched for it on Indiegogo search engine, it would not come up at all. It would be completely invisible, and it wouldn't come up in a Google search.
Was that like a metadata issue, you think, or?
I honestly, I have no idea.
Yeah, yeah.
I sent multiple emails to Indiegogo during each of these books, and no response. Like I think for the Embrace 2, which is the last one that I did where this happened on, and I was like, yeah, I'm done with Indiegogo. For the Embrace 2, I sent an email. I got an initial response, and they were like, "Oh, like you're just not you're like our go-go algorithm doesn't push unless it's getting like specific social media, a specific external engagement." And I was just like, I made over $6,000 in my first hour of the campaign. I've had over like 12,000 like 12,000 views on Twitter with over 200 retweets. I've got all this
Yeah,
data
so
from Facebook and Instagram. That's bullshit. Give me an actual answer.
yeah, so
Pardon my French.
yeah, no, it's fine. And so the
Um,
backlinks part of it is kind of like what they were saying that was that way to help
yeah,
you, but it doesn't sound like the backlinks thing
no,
is the issue.
it was a complete non-answer. And like there are lots of theories as to why it's been happening on Indiegogo. But the fact of the matter is that they don't they either don't know how to fix it or they don't care.
Yeah.
And either way, they're charging the most platform fees of any of the crowdfunding platforms. So why am I going to host on your platform when you take, I think it's 8% of my campaign funds, and prevent me from reaching new audiences and new markets?
Yeah, I mean that's crazy. Part of the promotional side, everybody kind of goes through social media and stuff like that now, and they kind of see like ups and downs and kind of what do you feel is the biggest, other than of course that problem that you had, but what do you think is like the biggest issue that indie creators have when it comes to promoting your books, right? Like what do you
It's
feel
a
is like the
it's a
drawback?
two-part problem that are both are related. So the first problem is reaching new audiences, right? And the biggest thing that contributes to that is drama in the indie comic scene,
Okay.
because there is so much of it. It's like a minefield. So like, to put this into perspective, my process as an indie creator since I had started was I would do a campaign and I'd go like 110% while I was live, going on as many interviews, like at many shows, as many interviews, everything like that I could, all the time. And then once the campaign ended, I would take a step back, focus on fulfillment, and get a break. Right. Then by the time I came back, it was like 12 nuclear bombs had gone off, and all of a sudden people that I had gone on to promote before were I had either completely canceled their shows, were persona non grata in whatever freaking corner of the indie scene that was going on, and this, that, the other. Uh, Additionally, you have things like certain people running campaigns that don't fulfill, despite bringing in more than enough to handle their fulfillment burdens and what have you. So it's one of these things that what that ends up doing is it shakes confidence in indie as a platform to the audience, and so people leave. And so this is why, as I said, it's these problems are interconnected because they create the biggest issue, which is a difficulty in reaching new audiences. You know, when the crowdfunding boom happened in 2019, 2020, going into 2021, I would say as well. There were no other there were no alternatives for entertainment. People were pencils down. You had everybody had disposable income because of stimulus checks, and so like there was a lot of wealth to go. There was a lot to go around, and people were very excited. But then, you know, people's projects kept getting delayed and delayed and delayed, and so this has caused a lot of consumers to walk away from the independent scene, and that creates a problem as an indie creator, and all the drama pushes away promoters. You know, there were like 20, 30 shows that I could count on to go on pretty frequently when I first started. Of those 20, there are maybe 5 or 10 left from 2020 to now. So like it's one of those things where it's just like, man, it's really hard to get your books out there, and get them in front of new people.
Now, do you feel like going to cons or like Comic Cons, do you feel like that's still a viable option for people? Like, especially,
I do think so, and that's why, like, you know, up until now, I haven't been doing the convention stuff, because what I had been doing was clearly working. Like most of my campaigns fund, I hit over 5 figures, and I'm able to do what I need to do. So like what I had been doing was very functional. But now it's a whole thing of, if I want to expand my audience and not just rely on my current base, I need to go do new things. And so this year I'm making it a point to make sure that I go to 3 conventions at minimum. Because I do think that that is a very viable way to customer face and get your brand out there to new people.
Yeah, and I mean, you could probably meet some artists too, or some collaborating with writers, and kind of get into the indie scene in the sense of, hey, I seen your stuff, like how's everything going with you, and try to catch up with people, because I know that like at work for me, like, because I don't do this as a day job, but like I'll meet people virtually, and it's like one way, but then it's like you meet the person in person, and it's like, oh hey, how's it going? I can't believe we finally met in person and stuff like that. So if there was an indie comic book or a creator or writer or artist that you could kind of say, hey, I really look up to this person in the world, like where we're at right now, or even in the past. Hold on. So who would be the one that you would say, hey, if they could work on your book with you, who would you want to work on your book with you?
And so this is just independent people.
Independent, mainstream, whoever you want.
All right. So independent, I think I've actually like crossed a lot. Like I was very fortunate when I came in, and I got to work with some great people. And I'm still getting to work with great people. I had V. Ken Marion and Andrew Dahlhaus do a variant cover for me. Like I have been very fortunate in the people I've gotten to work with in this scene. But in terms of like a mainstream person, Daniel Warren Johnson is at like the top of my, like, I would, if I got to collaborate on a book with Daniel Warren Johnson, I would probably cry. Like it would be a huge deal.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, you know, and you never know because you always put stuff out in the universe, and then all of a sudden it's like, hey,
Yeah.
I saw this, and hey, I definitely want to reach out to you. That I hope that for you, right? So these are the kind of things that I want to make sure that people kind of see, they kind of understand, they kind of look at when it comes to indie creating. Because I like, listen, we could talk about the book all day, but people need to buy the book in order to really feel the story, right? So I really kind of want to know more of the trials and tribulations of being indie, so that way people could kind of understand, this is somebody's passion, this is somebody's not necessarily their mainstream hustle, but it's basically something that they want to put out there and they want you to enjoy it. So I wanted to kind of give people the different angle than just saying, hey, tell me more about your book, that type of stuff. So it was definitely something I wanted just to kind of drove out there. So one of the biggest things before we close the interview is when it comes to giving someone advice, right? So this is a new up and coming indie artist. This is somebody that's like a kid that wants to do their own comic book and wants to be able to inspire people the way that you do. What's some advice that you would give that person if they wanted to get into the game?
Ooh. Uh, for artists, make sure that you are managing your schedule. I know that one of the big things that comes up on the indie writers side from like all of the chats and everything that I'm in is that occasionally you will have artists that overextend themselves. And I understand it's tough and you're trying to make living and everything like that. But especially from an independent creator standpoint, we're investing our own capital to do that. And so you need to be respectful of every dollar that you make and make sure that you're able to meet your deadlines. So for an artist, manage your schedule, make sure that you don't overextend yourself, and if you do, communicate. Like let them know it's like, hey, I'm really sorry I'm behind. Here's the reason why. Like let me make this right.
Mhm.
For a writer's standpoint, um, editor. Always have an editor. The pros aren't too good for editors, neither are you. Um, and an editor is more than just somebody to catch your spelling mistakes and what have you. They are there to make sure that you are doing what you want to, that you are conveying what you want to convey in the best way possible. And so if you have an editor that tells you, hey, X, Y, or Z doesn't work with something, you listen, you fix it, you get it done. Nobody is above critique. Nobody is above improving their work. There's always ways to make something better. No one is above it.
Yeah. Yeah, you're not a Tarantino, no.
No.
But I mean, it's important to understand that even Tarantino or any of the other big wigs up there, they have to use editors, they have to use support because without the support to kind of correct issues, to help like really focus, because sometimes you're so in it that you don't see the mistakes or you don't see the hiccups that you have in there. And they're like, hey, this is a plot hole, you got to fill this, that type of thing. So or hey, you contradicted yourself in this page and
Yeah.
now you're saying something different. So it's always good to have somebody on the outside looking in so that you always have and they're kind of like your first reader, right? So they kind of
Yeah.
just say, hey, you might want to fix this a little bit, or they might say, this is great, but you might want to tweak this here and there. So it definitely helps to have somebody to kind of their ear and their eyes that you don't necessarily see sometimes. So definitely great advice. Mike, if there's anything that you want to leave people, so that was the advice part, right? But if there's anything that you want to leave people with your book, your experience, and kind of the things that you want to portray for your industry, what is the last message that you would like to leave for everyone that is watching this episode?
Building a comic book whether it's like you just doing one book or if you're trying to start your own imprint or everything like that. It's a marathon, not a race, not a sprint, I should say. Um, do like if you are expecting instant gratification and what have you, you're in the wrong field. And there is a lot of that now because of what's happened, as I said, during what I like to call the crowdfunding boom, right? Like people were making all sorts of money. Um, that's no longer the case. There's been a super saturation of content. Um, and it's the wild, wild west out here. So just remember that no matter what you're doing, you're not in this for the money at this point. You're in this because you love making these books, you love making this content, and you have a story you want to tell. Treat it with that level of care, treat it with that level of enthusiasm, and eventually you will likely get people at the door. But that is on you. You have to be a willing to go out there and promote. You have to be willing to go out there and talk to people. You have to be willing to put yourself out there. And if you're not, then don't expect different results.
I think somebody else used that line. It's really weird. It's like it's like a string theme. Einstein kind of said, if you do the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, it's the definition of insanity, right? So definitely always be willing to try different things because you never know. You throw spaghetti on a wall. Sometimes it sticks, sometimes it doesn't. So awesome note. So just to kind of remind everybody, this is for Icon Comic Con, November the 1st. It's going to be from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. We're going to have artists. We're going to have indie comic creators. We're going to have writers and authors. We're going to have podcasters, comic book vendors. Hopefully we can get the 501st Legion again. We already have 4 guest artists coming. So we're actually working on our 5th one. So if you guys know of any good artists that you would like and that I could reach out to, let me know. But yeah, this is our first iteration of Icon Comic Con. We moved the date so that way it better fits the other industry because, being on top of each other is not always the conducive way. We want to support each other's cons and not really step on anybody's toes. So Icon Comic Con is going to be November 1st, again, in Fishkill, New York, at the Fishkill Rec Center. So come stop by, have some fun, check it out. And this is, Behind the Comics. This is our podcast that we're doing to kind of help support not only our Comic-Con, but also the indie artists out there. Michael, thank you very much for allowing me to interview you. Check us out every Monday at 12 afternoon or 12 p.m. So that way you can see all these awesome episodes coming out with all the indie artists and comic book creators that we can interview in time for our Comic-Con. All right, Mike, that being said, we're going to check it out and we're going to be hitting the streets, checking out some more artists and comic book creators. Stay tuned.